Andy, we officially have control of the whole building. We are in control. I mean, seriously, we have the whole building to ourselves this morning. Not only is it early, as usual, but everything's close. So therefore, it has been Led Zeppelin 1. First album, it's just like echoing through the hallways. But Andy says you could hear Jimmy Page when he came into the parking lot. Why do we have the building to ourselves? It's Labor Day, and we're not going to take the day off. So, because you're having the day off. So, something to do. Listen to me ramble on. Led Zeppelin again, that's right. It's Monday, September 4th, and I said, what did I say, Andy? I said, see you in September. That is so bad. So, most of you have the day off. What are we doing, Andy? Podcasting and then brunch? We're going to do brunch because it's overpriced. Crap. It's weird being here. It's like everybody's gone. Big shout out, thank you to Brandon out at Holistic Relief by Design. Brandon and the gang got the, pretty much I think the best in town, Andy. It's recreational and medical. All kinds of strains. They are home of the Donnie Burger Indica. Thanks, Brandon. Big shout out. This is what your advertising dollar gets you. Yeah. So, what happened, Andy, over the weekend? Labor Day weekend. Everybody was traveling. I know it's really dead. Yesterday, Sunday, today, Monday. I guess over the weekend we had hurricanes in Florida, and we had the big Ukraine offensive. Was it, Andy, in the eastern part of the Ukraine, making news? Coach Prime. No shit, Andy. Coach Prime, Colorado Buffaloes. He took his Colorado Buffaloes into TCU, and they were ranked last year pretty high when they beat Michigan in the playoffs. They were 12-1. Andy, 13, look that up. They had one loss. Prime time, man. He upset them. 17th ranked TCU. Upset. Also over the weekend, but not over the weekend, but kind of because it was Friday, legendary Margaritaville icon, beach music, surfing dude, cabana, Jimmy Buffett. He died at 76. Press release says that he was surrounded by his family, friends, music, and dogs. Yeah, Andy, that family, friends, music, and dogs. Jeez. Sources revealed later on that he had, and we knew this before, he had skin cancer. I mean, he lived his whole life on the beach in the sun. This is before sunscreens and when we used to lather up. Remember that? We used to lather up with like baby oil and stuff so we could, and then spray yourself with water so you just bake. But that was the cause of death, was the skin cancer. Andy, did you see him? You did. I saw him. Where'd you see him at? Texas. All my exes live in Texas. No, not a one. I saw Jimmy in Missoula in May of 1976. It was Jimmy Buffett, Jerry Jeff Walker, Hart, and the Mission Mountain Wood Band. The Mission Mountain Wood Band. They used to be like the house band at the Park Hotel downtown. Not the house band, but they played there. They played there a lot. But they played at the Aber Day Kegger in May of 1976. We've talked about the Aber Day Kegger. You know, we've talked about it before. No, that was the only time I saw him. He only played at the Aber Day Kegger once. And, right, that was Andy's trying to explain to me what the Aber Day Kegger was. And we've kind of talked about it in a couple of shows way back when. But the Aber Day Kegger was kind of an event that kind of defined life in Missoula in the 1970s. It ran from 1972, and it started out like at Bonner Flats, I believe. It ended up, last one was in 79, and that was, they had it in the KOA rodeo grounds. And it was like, it started around 11 noon, and then until they didn't have a light show or anything. It just ended when the sun went down. And basically you paid, it was first of all, it was the brainchild of back in the 70s, 71, 72, the library in Missoula took a huge cut in funding, almost no books, nothing. The sociology professor whose name escapes me, if you could get me the name, Andy, please. He had a class on how we can raise money for the library. So it's their brainchild. They came up with the idea to have a kegger. It worked, and it was legendary. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands of, you'd show up, you could buy a gallon pitcher slash cup. And you'd go wait in line, and they'd fill it up, and there was like Olympia beer and thousands of gallons, and bands would start playing. Like I said, Jimmy Buffett was there. It was Jerry Jeff Walker, Hart. Hart was in 76. They had just released Dreamboat. Andy is at 76. I'm in the right ballpark. Classic rock, ballpark, me, home run, every time. Like I said, it was a legendary thing. It was coupled with the cleanup day, so the kids had the day off of school. They'd be cleaning up Missoula, and then they'd go to the kegger. It was big. It got to be huge, and it would never work in this day. Oh, hell no. Hell no. Can you see? Everybody that drove up there drove back, for starters. There wasn't no designated drivers back in 1972. We didn't know what it was. You just drove to the kegger, and then you drove to the bars afterwards, because it got dark, and it was in May, so, it was getting dark at 8, 8:30, 9, maybe 8:30, so boom, off to the bars you go. It was legendary. It was awesome. I mean, that's the Aber Day Kegger and Jimmy Buffett. That's my memories of him. He was pretty big in that era. I know everybody, in Missoula was like, yeah, we're like, no, stop. You're in the mountains. You're not in the beach. So basically, Andy, we're here on Labor Day. So what is Labor Day? Why? What is it? Well, it's the unofficial. It's the unofficial end of summer. It's the official, like, school's been starting right around this weekend. When I was a kid, it didn't start till the day after Labor Day, the Labor Day weekend. It's the start, like I said, college football is in full swing this weekend. Like I said, Michigan won 30-3. And of course, it's Labor Day. So, okay. You can't wear white anymore after low white pants. No whites. Okay? It's after Labor Day. Who in fact, why? Is that a wives? And according to the cute blonde with cute feet that sells Denver mattresses commercials, it also is the best time to buy mattresses. So, Labor Day is what, Andy? We're here. We should be like brunch afterwards, and then we're going to go get some mattresses and not wear white and go to school. Seriously, though, Andy, really. Labor Day is a federal holiday in the United States, and 80 other countries also celebrate something like celebrate a good time on Labor Day. Then it's, it was a 5-day weekend. People were leaving town on Wednesday. I know. Wednesday, all last week they were going, I'm going, it's Labor Day weekend. Yeah, but it's only Sunday of last week. They're already gone. It's celebrated in the United States always. Yeah, always. Without exception, Andy. No, I'm not going to look it up till the cows come home. Okay? It's always celebrated on the first Monday in September, which would explain why we're playing Zeppelin and doing Zeppelin references, because it's not September, Andy, it's September. All Zeppelin, all September long. That's what it is. Okay, so, what? Why do we have Labor Day? Why do we have it? So we can have a 3-day weekend and not wear white and go to brunch. When did we? Seriously? All right. Andy's asking me why, where, when, starting in the late 19th century. Trade unions, labor movements, they started to grow. Unionists proposed that one day would be set aside. Even back in the 1800s, workers were like trying to ban upper management and strong management, and that's why unions exist. Okay, I grew up in Detroit till high school, so I grew up in Detroit, Union City. It's a pro-union. What was the date there, Andy? 1894. Okay, 1894. Days were set aside. Labor Day itself was actually started by a group of people called the Central Labor Union. That sounds like some tough-ass guys. Knights of Labor. We're the Knights of Labor. We will fuck you up. Which kind of was, which was, they organized the first parade in New York City. So the labor union and all that's been around doing strings, pulling strings a lot. The parades and stuff, and Andy, like, what did you say, 1894? 1894 it became a federal holiday, but how many? All right. 1894, it became a federal holiday. However, 30 30 states, did I do it 3 times? 30, 30, 30. So Sheldon-like. 30 states had already made it a holiday. So the majority of states that had it a holiday convinced the government. How many states were there? Right, being raised in Detroit, being raised in a union town like Detroit. I started learning about the unions in grade school and the union giants, what it did for the workers, how they organized, because that's where I lived. And, when I moved to Missoula, they had mills and a college town, so that's what was going on, okay? Unions was almost part of, unions was almost part of the curriculum in high school. UAW, that's the United Auto Workers, big union, big. You got to remember, before imports came and before we had the problems that, I remember that my high school parking lot was not full of, there wasn't one import in the parking lot. Oh, no. Not yet. Not 72, 73, 74. If I'm wrong, anybody that's in, I got a lot of guys that, people that I went to high school with, watch my podcast. If I'm wrong, correct me, right? Let me know. But I don't remember in Sentinel High School in 1972 or 3, a whole lot of imports sitting in the parking lot. I remember Camaros and Mustangs and maybe a VW now and then. Bugs, but not. Anyway, what I was saying was the United Auto Workers was founded in 1935 in Detroit. And within a year, you got the spin-offs, the UAW, the AFL, and CIO. You've heard them all. Those are household names and initials in any industrial town in Chicago, Toledo, Detroit, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, anywhere. Okay? No doubt, Andy. Andy was just doing this. Hoffa. You can't talk about the labor unions and the union movement and Labor Day and labor unions, because Labor Day is the unions got it going. So we're talking about labor unions and Labor Day, Aber Day Keggers. We're drinking, listening, wasted away again in Margaritaville. No conversation, Andy, you're right, would be incomplete if we're talking about labor unions and Labor Day, where I'm sorry to get sidetracked, but that's what I do. You can't do it without talking about Jimmy Hoffa. James Riddell Hoffa was born in 1913. He was one of the America's largest, foremost organizers of unions, and he was known for his organization, I guess you would say, of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And when you're talking unions and you're talking labor unions, you're talking, heavyweights in this corner weighing at 225. You're heavyweight of unions. The Teamsters, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, we're talking one of the big boys, and you can't talk the Teamsters Union without talking about Hoffa, the union, the corruption, the charges he faced, the mob ties, and the famous, It might be famous, but it's not a big mystery. Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Okay, anybody that lived in Detroit, this disappearance. We all knew Hoffa was a hero in Detroit. He was an icon. I mean, I was born in '56. He took over as president 57. Like I said, Hoffa was he was the force in organizing the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, and was the president of the Teamsters from 1957 until 1971. Now, I was born in 1956, and he took over. So my whole lifetime that I could remember living in Detroit, Jimmy Hoffa was a hero, an icon, and the leader of the Teamsters Union. In 1964, I was 8. He negotiated the National Master Freight Agreement, which covered 500,000 at the time. 500,000 in 19. You got this right, Andy? 19. Yep, you do. 500,000 in 1964. Truckers. That's what the Teamsters were part of. The Teamsters Union. It was, like I said, the heavyweight. The heavyweight. It's the biggest union in the United States at the time. But Hoffa. Yeah, Hoffa was involved with organized crime. It was like real life Goodfellas, Andy. I mean, real life. It's like, funny how? You think I'm funny? I'm a clown? I amuse you? Funny? How the fuck am I funny? He was like hanging around with those guys from Jump Street. Okay, we're not getting into Hoffa because we've done a podcast on Hoffa too. He began his, like I said, we've covered, he began his involvement in organized crime from his early years in the Teamsters, by the 1960s. And it was that connection that he continued until he disappeared in 1975. 1975. I graduated in 1975. Saigon fell in 1975. Jimmy Hoffa disappeared in 1975. Coincidence? Where am I going with that, Andy? That is a coincidence. Can't be connected. I had nothing to do with Hoffa. Or did I? Da, 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 da. All right. Remember, Jimmy was convicted in 71, jury tampering, attempted bribery, conspiracy, mail and wire fraud. That was convicted and when, Andy? 1969, so he was still president when he was in prison of the teams. He was. Okay. His sentence was 13 years federal. He was in prison in 1967. 64. Okay. All right. Not 904. All right, got that. So mail fraud, 64, prison is 67, was 13 years, federal time. Then he resigned the Teamsters in 71. Makes much more sense, Andy. Makes much more sense. And then, while he was serving those 13 years, he was pardoned by Richard Nixon. Now, it wouldn't be amiss if we didn't mention, or I didn't mention that. While in prison, he rubbed shoulders with the mob, made enemies with the mob, Remember, he worked with him, but he wasn't a made man. So when I talked about Hoffa the last time, everybody's like, gee, what happened? We don't know. What happened to Hoffa? What could have happened? So, all right. So when Hoffa got out of prison, how are we on time, Andy? Good? We can do this? All right. So when Hoffa got out of prison, he wanted to regain leadership of the Teamsters Union. No, he'd made enemies, he'd burned bridges, and it was not the 1950s anymore. That like Sergeant Carter haircut from Gomer Pyle just wasn't cutting it. Not only that, but the mob kind of had control. We've talked about the mob before. They had their fingers so intertwined in the workings of the Teamsters. Anthony Provozone. Anthony Provozone. And Anthony Provozone was the national, he was what, the New Jersey head and the national vice president? President was vacated with Hoffa, so he was basically running it. And he was doing all this when Hoffa was in prison. So Provozone was an underboss for the Genovese crime family in New York. And he was feuding with Hoffa anyway over when they were both in prison. They had a feud in prison. They, like I said earlier, he was just rubbing shoulders the wrong way. Provozone was like, nope. When Hoffa's like, hey, I want to take over the Teamsters meeting, Provozone was like, funny? How? How are you funny? You making me laugh like a clown? I mean, seriously, he was pissed. Detroit Mafia boss Anthony Giaccone and his brother Vito were like trying to be the mediators in this, but you got mob capos and mob bosses from Detroit like they're trying to mediate for each other. No, they're working in cahoots. So in every crime there's a who, what, where, when, and how. What do we know, Andy? We've talked about it. What do we know? We know everything, but we know who, what, when, how. We don't know where. Hoffa disappeared on July 31st, 1975. After he was supposed to meet Provozone and Giaccone. Meeting was due to take place at 2 p.m. at the Matchus Red Fox restaurant in Detroit suburb of Bloomfield Township, not far from Farmington Hills, where I was as a kid. Hoffa even wrote on his work calendar, TG, Anthony Giaccone, 2 p.m. It's right on his office calendar. Between 2:15 and 2:30, Hoffa called his wife from right back behind the Red Fox restaurant. He was angry, mad. God damn it, they set me up. They aren't here. He told his wife, put some steaks on. He'd be home at 4 for dinner. Witnesses then report seeing Jimmy Hoffa in the back of a maroon Lincoln or Mercury with 3 other people between 2:45 and 2:50, just 15 minutes after he talked to his wife. Turned out that 1975 Mercury Marquis Brougham was owned by an Anthony Giaccone's son, Joseph. August 21st, police searched it. An alert dog hit it. They didn't have DNA like they do now, so they had an alert dog that hit it for Hoffa's scent, but they couldn't prove if it was recent. They didn't know when he was in there. Yeah, they didn't know. We didn't know. We in Detroit kind of know this whole thing. Everybody has alibis. Some people were in town. They weren't in town. Like I said, if you're from Detroit, you know who. I just told you who. Anthony, Giacone. That's who. Brozone, that's who. Anthony and Anthony, that's who. Okay? What? They had him whacked. How? Well, we don't know how they did it. We can assume how they did it, but we don't really know how, Andy. We've seen many movies have been about it. Speculation. He's in the New Jersey Turnpike. What? We know he was whacked. We know when. We know it was July 31st. We know after 2:30, after he talked to his wife, and he didn't show up to home ever again. Certainly not 4 o'clock for steak. So we know who did it. We know we know who did it. We know Tony and Tony were either did it or they were behind it. What we don't know is where. Speculate how. Whacking, shooting, we don't know. But we can speculate that they killed him. Where? We don't know where. Like I said, there have been so many reports. So many deathbed consent. He's in a turnpike in New Jersey. He's under Giant Stadium. He's in a barrel on a farm. Smart reports say that the mob had a funeral parlor that had a crematorium. That makes the most sense. Hoffa was a high profile. Cannot have any mistakes. Can't have anything left behind. That makes the most sense to me. Not a big conspiracy theory when Hoffa, I'm from Detroit. So, Andy, it's Labor Day. We got to talk about labor unions, labor days, and labor. Hoffa's and the mob used to own the labor unions. So, you dragged me in here. And, I'm going with Hoffa. H-O-F-F-A, Hoffa. They had commercials. I'm serious. Yeah. When I was a kid, there was like, he was the greatest guy. It was like, instead of the Mickey Mouse song, it was a Jimmy Hoffa song. Be on the Soupy Sales show. Local, exactly. Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And you got to be old, and you got to be back east, I do believe, to recognize who I'm talking about when I'm talking about the Super Sales Show and Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. So, Andy, what are you doing? We took up time talking about Hoffa and the labor unions, but, it's Labor Day. Labor Day is what it is now because of Gangs of New York and movies like that where you had workers fighting management. Unions were important. So, Andy, we're done. We're good. Andy says we're like pretty good today. So he's wondering why we got all into this, but I said remember now. We got next week's show. We don't know what we're doing, but remember it's September or September, which is all Zeppelin, all September long. See that YouTube video of Edge? Who's the other guy? Jack Black watching Jimmy play spectacular. So, hope you enjoyed the Labor Day break. We will be back next week. Remember to spay and neuter, adopt, don't shop. Foster, rescue, adopt a pet, shelter pet, get involved, volunteer, little money, it doesn't matter. The boys and girls need us. So, until next week, Andy, we're good to go. Andy says we're good to go. Thanks for joining me. We will see you next week. Until next week, Andy, we're out of here. We're out of here, ladies and gentlemen.